got a giant show ahead for you guys. It is in fact the Young Turks. I am in fact your host, Cenk Uygur. Will I be doing an epic Told You segment? Momentarily. Hold. In fact, tell all your friends, neighbors, and Randy Gonzalez right now. Go share the stream right now, because in about a minute, I'm going to unleash. It's going to be awesome. Of course, it's on Rex Tillerson. But later in the program, the House so-called Intelligence Committee says that there was no collusion between Russia. And in fact, it's not, of course, the committee. It's just the Republicans on the committee. I'm going to unload on that. That's going to be fun. Bloop, bloop, bloop. We've got UFOs later in the show. Literally. Donald Trump's trying to sneak in a racist nominee. We caught him. That's later in the program. Almost no one's talking about that. And I think that's a really important and interesting story. And then last night I interviewed Ken Bone. All the members could see that live. So that's tyrtnetwork.com/join to become a member and get all the shows commercial free. So anyway, and Ken Bone, true to his character, has a podcast where he has a segment called What's Good? Okay, well, in an ode to Bone, we're going to do a What's Good segment on Joe Biden a little bit later in the program. You're going to enjoy that. So nothing but a giant show ahead for you guys. Go. Oh, I forgot to tell you guys when to switch to Told You. You guys got Told You in there? We're going to, oh God. How do we not have that graphic? All right, see if we can get that sidebar in a panic, because we're doing that story first. Yeah, I'm saying it on air. Everything's gonna be okay, all right? Jesus is my co-pilot. Let's see if we can do that. Jesus, when we get to videos 3 through 5, if we have gotten that sidebar, that would be lovely, okay? Go, go, go. All right. Rex Tillerson is out. Oh, here we go. Oops. Well, that's true too, but I meant.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Yeah. Down goes Rex. Down goes Rex. Down goes Rex. Okay, is it something to celebrate? Well, kind of. Rex Tillerson started out as a bad guy. Continued as a bad guy throughout, but at the end, a little bit of a saving grace. So he was the former CEO of ExxonMobil. He was picked as the Secretary of State for reasons that I'm going to explain to you in a second. In fact, I explained it to you 5 days ago in a prediction that I made about how Rex Tillerson would be out very, very soon, as you'll see, right? But we were told by Donald Trump that Rex Tillerson was not going to be out. Just a couple of months ago, he tweeted this. The media has been speculating that I fired Rex Tillerson or that he would be leaving soon. Fake news. He's not leaving, and while we disagree on certain subjects, I call the final shots. We work well together, and America is highly respected again. Why does the president have to put in brackets, I call the final shots? You thin-skinned clown, everyone knows that. You are so deeply insecure. But back then, up to Rex Tillerson, no, outrageous. Of course, I'm not gonna fire him. We're not in discussions over that. Now, today, as he fired him, listen to what Trump says in the middle of this explanation of why he fired Rex Tillerson. Watch.
I've worked with Mike Pompeo now for quite some time. Tremendous energy, tremendous intellect. We're always on the same wavelength. The relationship has been very good, and that's what I need as Secretary of State. I wish Rex Tillerson well, and I'm really at a point where we're getting very close to having the cabinet and other things that I want. Rex and I have been talking about this for a long time. We got along actually quite well, but we disagreed on things. When you look at the Iran deal, I think it's terrible. I guess it was okay. I wanted to either break it or do something, and he felt a little bit differently. So we were not really thinking the same. And I wish Rex a lot of good things. I think he's going to do. I think he's going to be very happy. I think Rex will be much happier now.
Well, I agree with that last part. Who wouldn't be happier leaving the insanity of the Donald Trump administration and his nonstop harassment and changing of his mind and berating of his own officials? I mean, it is absolute madness. But did you notice in the middle there, he said, Rex and I have been talking about this for a long time. Wait a minute, I thought you tweeted that it was fake news that you guys were talking about it. Look, about the millionth lie in a row from Donald Trump. Who would have guessed it? Now, he says it was partly about Iran. I'm going to expose that lie in a second, okay? But first, let's just note the Washington Post says, in fact, President Trump ousted Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and replaced him with CIA Director Mike Pompeo, orchestrating a major change to his national security team. So Pompeo's in, Tillerson's out. I wonder if anyone predicted this about 5 days ago. Well, let's find out. Now, as usual, I have a fun prediction for you guys, and I will say it ahead of time, and you'll get to see if I'm right or wrong. I believe Rex Tillerson will leave the administration very soon. So tick-tock, tick-tock. 5 days later. So if you notice, I said very soon, and of course, I said it ahead of time. Look, let me just pause here to say something really important about my fun predictions. Yeah, it's entertaining, it's fun. I think I got a pretty good record. You can check YouTube, it goes back 12 years, right? But that's not why I do it. I do it because I want you to understand that we're not Monday morning quarterbacking it. So when I tell you why it's going to happen, later people will say, oh no, it was for other reasons. I want you to know ahead of time that the reason I'm calling it is because people will try to deny the real reason that it happened. Now, if I was full of it, well, my predictions wouldn't come true and that person would not be leaving office, right? But he did leave office. The reason I predicted it 5 days ago is because I wanted you to know the real reason why he's leaving. So the real reason is not reported in any of this press. It's that ExxonMobil had a deal with Russia to do oil exploration. It was a $500 billion deal, but the revenue could equal $9 trillion. And I explained that to you last week. And I said ExxonMobil canceled the deal. Once that deal was canceled with Rosneft, the Russian oil company, Rex Tillerson's reign was over as Secretary of State. The rest was just playing out the string. That's why I was in a hurry to make that prediction as soon as I saw the ExxonMobil news, because I knew that it was a matter of time. So let me show you that part of the prediction here as well. Now that the ExxonMobil deal is not going to happen with Rosneft, he has no reason to stay. The whole point of him going there was to lift the sanctions and do this deal. Now, as I explained then, and as I explained over a year ago when he was first appointed, you don't randomly pick the CEO of ExxonMobil to do a job he's never done before, that he has no experience in, which is Secretary of State. He's never worked in any government, in any foreign relations, never done any of that. You don't pick that guy out of a weird coincidence. You do it because ExxonMobil had a deal, okay, with Russia. Now that that deal is not relevant, there's no reason for Tillerson to be there. And that's exactly what happened here. So now, there is one part that I got a little wrong. Now you'll see that most of the stuff I said here at the end, it also came to fruition. But the part that's a little off is actually important. And I want to talk about that and its ramifications. But first, let me show you the ending of that video from last week. Rex Tillerson wanted huge deals for ExxonMobil where he worked. Now that he's not going to get that, he's going to leave. And at the time, they will say, oh no, he wants to spend more time with his family, and he disagreed with Trump on some trifling issue that's not really the issue at hand, but he is gone. He's gone because Exxon's not doing the deal anymore. So the part that was again correct was a misdirection on why. So Trump mentioned Iran, you'll see in the Washington Post, later they mentioned North Korea. I'll get to that in a second. But the part that's a little off is that I thought Tillerson would leave because the whole point was to get that $1 trillion deal for his ex-company, etc. But it turns out Trump fired him. To me, that is actually more important and more of a pressing issue today. So let me explain why, and let me explain the chronology of what happened. So apparently John Kelly calls Tillerson when he's on a diplomatic trip to Africa on Friday and says, hey, Rex, you might be getting a tweet from Trump soon. So now that's a heads up to his friend Rex Tillerson saying you might want to resign because Trump's about to fire you with a random tweet. Now, no other president ever fires anybody with a tweet, but Trump is Trump. So now Rex Tillerson does not resign. So then John Kelly's chief of staff then sends another message to Tillerson saying, Trump's going to send the tweet. In other words, come on, dude, don't get embarrassed, resign. And Tillerson, I guess partly to his credit, is like, no, if he's going to fire me, I demand that he have the courage to fire me. So he does not resign. And then in fact, Tillerson says, as you're gonna see in a second, on Monday, oh, the poisoning that happened in Britain, that was Russia, clearly Russia. Boom, hours later he's fired, okay? So it's definitely about Russia. It's not about Iran, it's not about North Korea, it's about Russia, no question about it. Now, Tillerson's playing cat and mouse with him there. He's like, oh, you're gonna fire me over Russia? Go ahead, big guy, fire me. In fact, I'll tell you it was clearly Russia who did the poisoning. Fine, okay, at least you had the courage to fire me because I'm not resigning to do your job. So why, if it's not Tillerson resigning because he cared about the ExxonMobil deal, why does Trump fire him? Because the back channel still exists. The Russians were furious with Tillerson. The Russians were furious that Exxon canceled the deal. I told you yesterday and read you the quotes of Rosneft and the Russians saying, I mean, this deal, it's not, we shouldn't cancel it. And I also showed you that Exxon was the only company who had the know-how to be able to drill where the Russians need to drill. So when Exxon canceled the deal, the Russians were furious. So Tillerson had to go. And that is why Tillerson is sniping at the Russians on his way out. Trump, as this story is playing out, appears to still be taking direction in live time from the Russians. That's amazing. So let me give you the rest of the drama here. So Trump says what he said that we showed you about Tillerson's exit. Officially, he put out a long statement bragging about Pompeo coming to State Department, Haspel who will be replacing him at CIA. And at the very end, just has one little note on Tillerson. It says this: finally, I want to thank Rex Tillerson for his service. A great deal has been accomplished over the last 14 months, and I wish him and his family well. And that's it. So normally they do big thank yous back and forth. Tillerson has a press conference where he doesn't thank Trump at all. People think that's big drama. I don't think so. He was fired. Why would he thank him? Anyway, and then Tillerson takes a parting shot at Russia again in the press conference today. These are veiled comments, but I think if you know the whole story, it's very clear what's going on back and forth here. So now the Washington Post gives the nonsense reason. Look, I'm not blaming the Washington Post and the mainstream media too much. It's harder for them to connect the dots. They have to say, well, look, it would be nice if they made an effort at it, but instead they go with the standard line that the government gave them. So the president, who has long clashed with Tillerson, they explain, who he believes is too establishment in his thinking, felt it was important to make the change now as he prepares for possible high-stakes talk with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, as well as upcoming trade negotiations, 3 White House officials said. So look, that's the Washington Post saying, I don't know, these are what the White House officials said. I think that they should go deeper into the story, but why is the White House saying that? Now look, they just said North Korea and Iran and trade deals and to establishment. In other words, squirrel, 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 squirrel. Which one is it? What was so bad enough that you had to publicly fire your Secretary of State, which again, if you don't follow politics closely, that's a giant move. That's an earthquake. If Obama or George W. Bush or any of those guys had to fire their Secretary of State, not resign, not amicably part ways and talk about how I'm spending time with the family, etc. That's gigantic. It ain't over small disagreements on these other issues. Is he a little too establishment? Is he not establishment? It's over the mother lode or the motherland, if you will. It's the one unspoken thing that they keep making references to, but not actually stating. It's over the Russian ExxonMobil deal. He's the former CEO of ExxonMobil. When is it gonna get through people's heads? That's what it was about. Okay, so now there's the issue of the poisoning. Now, I told you Tillerson took some shots. I'm gonna explain those in a second too, but I wanna be clear. This is about the ex-Russian agent in the UK. So on Monday, the British Prime Minister, Theresa May, said it was highly likely that the Russian government was behind the attack that has left Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia critically ill, calling it, quote, an unlawful use of force by the Russian state against the United Kingdom. When Sarah Huckabee Sanders was asked about it in a press conference yesterday, she answered with, And they asked her, look, no, okay, I got it. You condemned the attacks. Everybody condemns the attacks. But was it Russia? Well, we are with our friends in the UK. In other words, she wouldn't say it, Finally today, they were forced to say it. I'll get to that in a second. But how do they know it was Russia? The UK government has said it has identified the nerve agent used on Skripals on March 4th as being from the Novichok family. Novichok nerve agents were developed by Russia during the Cold War and are highly toxic, as much as 10 times more deadly than the lethal XV nerve agent. So anyone in the intelligence community knows if it's this Novichok agent, that means it was the Russians. They're the ones who developed it, and everybody says almost no one else has their hands on this particular nerve agent. And hence, as NBC reports, hours before being ousted as Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson called the poisoning of an ex-Russian spy and his daughter with a military-grade nerve agent in the UK, quote, a really egregious act that appears to have, quote, clearly come from Russia. Now at the time, Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Donald Trump were saying, Russia, what's Russia? Part of what they're angry about is Rex Tillerson forces their hand. Their own Secretary of State says, come on, it was clearly Russia. Why won't you, which then begs the question of the rest of the White House. Why won't you say it? Theresa May says it, you keep waiting. Your own Secretary of State says it, and you keep waiting. And it forces their hand, which it did today. But I want to give you more details on what Tillerson said. In a statement released by the State Department on Monday evening, before Tillerson was fired, Tillerson called Russia, quote, an irresponsible force of instability in the world, acting with open disregard for the sovereignty of other states and the life of their citizens. And he wasn't done. He said that he was, quote, extremely concerned about Russia. And that's before he knew that Russia was going to fire him. Okay, and then finally he said, it certainly will trigger a response. I'll leave it at that. But the Russians did not leave it at that because apparently they sent a message to Trump to get rid of Rex Tillerson, and hours later he did. Like you can say, oh, Cenk, now that's too much, saying that the Russians ordered this. They wanted that Exxon deal. The Exxon deal gets canceled. I predict Tillerson's gone. Tillerson's gone within 5 days. He takes a parting shot over and over again at Russia before he's fired and after he's fired. And you're telling me there's no connection to Russia? No, it was their philosophical differences about how to do negotiations with North Korea. Trump has philosophical differences? Please, come on. So finally, after the British government says over and over that it's the Russians, they pause and delay and delay. And today, Trump administration finally says, and this is reported by Mediaite, or the White House says, President Trump agreed with Prime Minister May that the government of the Russian Federation must provide unambiguous answers regarding how this chemical weapon developed in Russia came to be used in the United Kingdom. But even in that official statement, they didn't say it was Russia. They just said, well, there are questions that need to be answered by the Russians in an unambiguous way. In fact, Trump is asked about it. And again, listen to how he parsed the words here. Even as he's saying it's Russia, he's not quite saying it. Watch.
I'm speaking to Theresa May today. It sounds to me like it would be Russia based on all of the evidence they have. I don't know if they've come to a conclusion. It sounds to me like they believe it was Russia, and I would certainly take that finding as fact. We're speaking with Theresa May today, and as soon as we get the facts straight, if we agree with them, we will condemn Russia or whoever it may be.
Even there, he says, we will condemn Russia if we agree with them or whoever it might be. This guy works for Putin. He's every opportunity to criticize Russia, he will not take it. I mean, North Korea talked about their nuclear button and he went ballistic on them. My button's bigger than yours, we're gonna destroy you, we're gonna pulverize you, etc. Recently, Putin did a video showing Russian missiles landing in Florida, saying you better not mess with us. No tweets, not one comment from Trump, who loves to fight every other person. They passed new sanctions on Russia. They're supposed to implement them in January, we're in March. Trump won't do it. Nope, I'm not gonna put the new sanctions in. Now, Russia wants Tillerson gone. All of a sudden, Tillerson's gone. And guys, look, I'm telling you, for the last time, I don't do the Monday morning quarterback because it's easy to say afterwards, oh, well, that's a theory that you've got, but I don't know about that. I tell you ahead of time because that's what the real deal is. So that if it turns out that the circumstances unfold as I told you, it's because of that reason. So yes, the back channel with Russia continues to this day. Trump, almost under penalty of law, will not criticize Russia. They have a deal. It is the most obvious thing in the world. It's right in front of you. Hopefully it's also right in front of Mueller. And look, there's two different things. One is it real? And the other is, can it be proven? I think based on the evidence we already have, it is overwhelming that Trump has some deal with Russia. Okay, now can they prove it? And if you're charged with something, that's one standard of proof. If the president is charged with something, it's a different standard of proof. So Mueller has to have overwhelming direct evidence of some sort of deal. Will he be able to get that with all the people that he has flipped, like Rick Gates and George Nader and Papadopoulos and Flynn, and the list goes on and on. That we're gonna see soon. But I think that he will get him because Mueller is smart and Trump is not. And when he does, finally we'll have the last act of this drama. Okay, now I want to show you what Rex Tillerson said on his way out. So Rex Tillerson, fired by Donald Trump, he pointedly refused to resign and then was fired, which again is not unprecedented, but incredibly rare, especially for a position as high as Secretary of State. So then he's going to give a press conference, which is also weird and rare, that as a person has been fired, he now has to go and give a press conference about all the people he's thanking. So first, he makes it clear that in fact, he will be leaving. Let's watch.
I received a call today from the President of the United States at a little after noontime from Air Force One. And I've also spoken to White House Chief of Staff Kelly to ensure we have clarity as to the days ahead. What is most important is to ensure an orderly and smooth transition during a time that the country continues to face significant policy and national security challenges. As such, effective at the end of the day, I'm delegating all responsibilities of the Office of the Secretary to Deputy Secretary of State Sullivan. My commission as Secretary of State will terminate at midnight, March the 31st.
So let me interpret a couple of things in there. His term is supposed to end March 31st. We're not at March 31st. He says, I'm leaving midnight tonight. In other words, I'm out. I'm gone, man. I don't want any piece of this. Then the reason he said he got a call from the president is because reports are from inside the State Department that the first time he officially knew that he was fired was in a tweet. So that again is very non-standard to say the least. But there he's clarifying, no, I got a call from the president and he fired me. So, and then that happened. Okay, so then he goes on to thank people for 6 long minutes. And one person he did not mention in those 6 minutes was President Donald Trump. So then, of course, Washington goes into overdrive on the snub heard around the world. Oh my God, he snubbed him, he snubbed him. Of course he snubbed him. He just got fired by the guy. What is he supposed to say? Like, now, it was an honor to be fired by President Trump. Now, remember, there was an earlier report about how Tillerson thought Trump is a moron. In fact, an effing moron. And he never, like, when he was first brought in, everything was hunky-dory. He's like, wow, I'm gonna be Secretary of State. This is amazing, it's an honor, wonderful, all that stuff. He spent some time with Donald Trump and he's like, okay, this guy's a moron, I don't know, I gotta get out of here, right? And at that point he realizes what a clown that Donald Trump is. Eventually that clown fires him. Why in the world would he thank that guy? Of course he's not gonna thank him. It would be preposterous to thank him. So at least he's not a standard politician in that way. And he didn't humiliate himself in that way on his way out, so I respect that. So now, more importantly, at the end, he's gonna take one more shot at Russia here. Now remember, Tillerson used to be great friends with Putin, the leader of Rosneft, which is the largest Russian oil company. He had gotten a medal from Putin and they were on great terms. And in fact, I believe he was brought in because of the deal between ExxonMobil and Russia. So, but since then, things have gone sour. And Tillerson has not been able to lift the old sanctions. And just last week, ExxonMobil announced that no, we are not going to do the deal with Russia anymore. So Russia is now irate at Rex Tillerson. And so he comes out on Monday, right before he's fired, and says the Russians are the ones who did the poisoning of the ex-agent of theirs in the UK. Now, that was not sanctioned by the Trump administration. Apparently, they were furious about that because Trump basically works for Putin. And all of you thinking that's hyperbole, I'll see you guys in the indictments, and I expect apologies at that time. So, and you're still not seeing it? Okay, anyway, so now Tillerson, because he knows what's going on behind the scenes, takes one more shot at Russia on his way out. Let's go to that. That's video 9. No, sorry, video 6.
And much work remains to respond to the troubling behavior and actions on the part of the Russian government. Russia must assess carefully as to how its actions are in the best interest of the Russian people and of the world more broadly. Continuing on their current trajectory is likely to lead to greater isolation on their part, a situation which is not in anyone's interest.
So he's like, look, man, this isn't going to work out for any of you guys. Now, one last thing that's unspoken here, and no one else is pointing out. Tillerson's a crafty guy. You don't get to be the CEO of ExxonMobil by not being bright. Now, you can say other things about how he got to be the CEO of ExxonMobil. You might say lacking a certain degree of morals as the fossil fuel companies light up the world with climate change, etc. So don't get me wrong, I'm not praising Rex Tillerson in that sense, but he's no dummy. You don't get to rise up politically with an ExxonMobil if you're not bright. So part of what he's doing is taking a parting shot at Trump and Russia. But the other thing that he's doing is basically saying, man, when this stuff goes down, I ain't got nothing to do with it, man. Remember at the end, I was against Russia. Remember all the things I said against Russia. When you hand out the indictments, I don't want any piece of that. He's a crafty guy, and that's what he was saying there that I think is clear, at least to me, apparently not as clear to the rest of the media. Okay, so one last part of this Tillerson story, then we'll take a break and I'll tell you about the replacements. Let me tell you about one other guy. Let's go to the next story. Okay. So in the midst of Rex Tillerson getting fired, there was an undersecretary at the State Department. His name is Steve Goldstein, and he pointed out something that was true. Ooh, that's not a good idea in the Trump administration. So let's go to that story. Ken Meyer reporting at Mediaite. Shortly after Tillerson's ouster was publicly confirmed, State Department Undersecretary of Public Diplomacy Steve Goldstein released a statement saying Tillerson never spoke to Trump about today's decision and had every intention of remaining in his position. Now, that's uncomfortable for the Trump administration. They wanted to pretend that Trump was a decent person and actually called Tillerson instead of just sending a public tweet and having him find out that way. Well, when Goldstein exposes that lie, they're not happy about that. As Meyer continues to explain, this directly challenges the notion that the White House told the secretary he would be phased out, and it also rebukes what Trump said about how he and Tillerson have spoken about this for, quote, a long time. The tweet might have been previewed by Chief of Staff John Kelly earlier Friday and Saturday. That's reporting out today as well. So Tillerson might have known that it was coming, but Trump never actually did the decent thing of picking up the phone and telling him. No, he just sent the tweet after Tillerson made the comments about how Russia almost certainly poisoned their ex-agent in the United Kingdom. And then Trump sends out the tweet, later wants to pretend that he did the right thing. Goldstein exposes that. So what happens to Goldstein? Associated Press, breaking. Officials, White House fires top Tillerson aide who contradicted account of Secretary of State's dismissal. And then Goldstein confirms it. So Dave Clark at AFP reporting, Undersecretary of State Steve Goldstein confirms he was sacked. Quote, "This has been the honor of my lifetime. I look forward to getting some rest." And he will. So God help you if in the Trump administration you ever make the mistake of telling the truth. All right, we'll be right back. All right, back on the Young Turks. What am I gonna do, not read tweets about how right I was? Okay, fine, you win, I'll read them. I Am Sock says, Cenk the prognosticator strikes again. Sarah Mack says, I've been waiting for TYT Live since the news of Rex Tillerson came out. This was one of the most clear of Cenk Uger's predictions. Disney Princess says, I got news on my phone about Rex Tillerson stepping down at around 5 a.m. and I mumbled, oh God, Cenk is gonna be unbearable. Democracy Dies in Darkness says, wow, Cenk isn't as unbearable as I thought he would be when I saw that Tillerson was out. Matt Strackbine, now getting into relevant stuff, says, so true, I've been watching MSM all day and haven't heard mention of the $1 trillion deal at all. And that's, Matt, thank you for pointing that out. And again, that's why we do it ahead of time. TJ Moore then says, a good point, good counterpoint. FYI, Cenk Uygur also predicted he would be so ripped, people would say to him to stop. Hold, we're not done with that prediction, Matt, and I will have you know that I have lost 7 pounds with my PBS diet, which I explained in the post game a couple of days ago. So tytnetwork.com/join to understand the wonders of that diet. And I had to actually tighten my belt yesterday. I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying, you better be careful, son. Okay, and finally, a Zappa fan with a nice pun, so I gotta do that one. Tillerson took a shot at Russia. Cenk, you must be putting me on. LOL, LOL indeed. All right, let's go to one other ramification that has nothing to do with Russia. Let's go over here. Okay. So Rex Tillerson's out as Secretary of State. Mike Pompeo, who's a CIA director, is going to replace him. Mike Pompeo has a long history of being deeply right-wing, deeply in the pocket of Donald Trump. Apparently rushes over to see Donald Trump quite frequently, not just when he's supposed to as CIA director. Make sure that he gives the intelligence briefings in person. Oh, Donnie, how are you doing, Donnie? You're so right, Donnie. And it worked for him, he's now the Secretary of State. But what's more interesting to me is the person who's going to replace him as the head of the CIA. And that's Gina Haspel. She is the new CIA, or she's going to be the new CIA director if confirmed. And confirmation for her could be an issue. And of course, Pompeo will be the new Secretary of State if confirmed. So now I want to go back to a New York Times story that came out when Haspel first got the deputy director job. So she's currently the deputy director. She's going to be moved up to director if confirmation happens. So this is to give you background on who Gina Haspel is and why she was picked. Buckle up. As a clandestine officer at the Central Intelligence Agency in 2002, Gina Haspel oversaw the torture of 2 terrorism suspects and later took part in an order to destroy videotapes documenting their brutal interrogations at a secret prison in Thailand. So let me be clear about Gina Haspel. She shouldn't be in government, she should be in prison. For the torture, yes, people say, oh, torture is illegal now. Torture was illegal back then. They just chose not to enforce that law. But even more importantly, they destroyed evidence. They said it in public, they admitted it. That's illegal under any and all definitions. No question about it. But they don't believe in the rule of law. And the person who doesn't believe in the rule of law the most is Donald Trump. He wants to stop any investigation of himself. He's like, oh, Gina Haspel tortured people. Great, I'm in favor of torture. She stopped an investigation of herself by destroying evidence. Hey, that's my kind of gal. Promote her. So now let me give you details of what happened. She played a direct role in the CIA's, quote, extraordinary rendition program, under which captured militants were handed to foreign governments and held as secret facilities where they were tortured by agency personnel. That's a couple of crimes for the price of one. Extraordinary rendition is otherwise known as kidnapping. They would go into other countries, including allied countries, and just take people off the street. They wouldn't ask the German government, for example, a top ally of ours, hey, we'd like you to arrest this person, we have a warrant for them, or we're gonna go through this process for them because we have evidence that they're a bad guy. Well, we don't have evidence, so we're not gonna tell the German government. We just go in there in a black op and kidnap someone off their street. And then we would bring them to a different foreign government, usually Eastern European governments, but also sometimes in Southeast Asia and other parts of the world. And in the Eastern European governments that were friendly to our black ops, they would reopen their gulags from the Soviet Union times and allow our CIA to go in there and torture our detainees, who we had such little evidence on that we couldn't even present it to allied countries as a reason for them to be detained. This kind of complete lawless actions that totally outside of our democracy and our allies' democracy is now being rewarded, not punished, but rewarded. All right, more details. The CIA's first overseas detention site was in Thailand. It was run by Ms. Haspel, who oversaw the brutal interrogations of two detainees, Abu Zubaydah and Abd al-Rahim al-Nashiri. Now, if you're a right winger out there, you might have seen those names and go, well, that's it. I mean, who cares? They tortured those guys. So what? I mean, they sound really scary. They got an Abu before their names and an Abd before one of them. It sounds really Arab and really scary. Well, let's find out what happened with Zubaydah. Mr. Zubaydah alone was waterboarded 83 times in a single month, had his head repeatedly slammed into the walls, and endured other harsh methods before interrogators decided he had no useful information to provide. Oops. Turns out we tortured the guy and he had no information. Now, look, we went over this at great length during the Bush administration. Torture is not done to get useful information. A lot of times, torture is actually done to get the wrong information. Because if torture worked, you wouldn't have to do it 83 times. On the second time, the third time, if it worked so well on the first time, you'd get the guy to confess. By the 83rd time, you're not interested in a confession. You're certainly not interested in the truth. You're interested in just gratuitous attacks on this guy. But the other thing that torture does is sometimes it gets you the wrong information you want. In a famous case where we did a fake burial of another detainee in Egypt, we captured this guy, extraordinary rendition, we bring him to Egypt, and we had him dig his own grave, and we pretended that we were going to execute him. Now again, this is illegal in 1,000 different ways. That's why she destroyed all the evidence, because they should go to prison, the people who did this torture against our laws. So they're doing the mock execution, and the guy later testified. He's like, I got it in the nick of time. I realized that they kept asking me leading questions. They wanted me to say that Iraq did 9/11. So in order to avoid execution, I finally said Iraq did 9/11, even though I knew Iraq had not done 9/11. So that actually was a bad guy. They could have gotten useful information out of him if they did standard interrogation practices. By the way, standard interrogation practices are not soft. They're standard because they work, they're time tested. You go off manual to torture when you're not interested in efficacy, you're interested in brutalizing someone and getting the wrong information. And of course, Dick Cheney later took that fake confession, used it for his own purposes, invaded Iraq, and then later they said, once again, oops, it turns out we had tortured that guy into a false confession. In fact, Iraq didn't do 9/11. So this is a well tested method to get people to say things that aren't true. And this is the person who's now going to be the head of the CIA. Even if you didn't object morally or legally, and there's something wrong with you if you don't, she's not going to get the right intelligence. That's not what she does. So if you care about our intelligence officials at all, but actually, you know what? As I just said that out loud, I came to a realization. Does Trump want our intelligence officials to get the right information or the wrong information? Whenever the CIA says it was the Russians who interfered in our election, Trump says, no, give me a different answer. Maybe Gina Haspel is exactly the kind of person who'd be happy to give you any answer you like, right or wrong. Now, just a last couple of things here on what Haspel did. The sessions were videotaped and the recording stored in a safe at the CIA station in Thailand until 2005, when they were ordered destroyed. By then, Ms. Haspel was serving at CIA headquarters, and it was her name that was on the cable carrying the destruction orders. She should be in prison. She signed a document saying destroy evidence. If you did that, you'd be in prison for decades. The agency's announcement about her promotion came with a long list of testimonials from retired officials, much as prominent authors write blurbs of the back for the back of other writers' books. The list notably included prominent Obama administration officials such as James Clapper, the former director of national intelligence. He was, quote, very pleased with what she did. Michael Morell, who twice served as the CIA's acting director, and he said, I applaud the appointment. I read you that last part because I want you to understand that the lying is bipartisan. So Trump is thrilled with someone who's pro-torture and pro-destroying evidence. But the Obama administration, what did they say? Oh, we're not gonna look backwards, we're gonna look forwards. Under that principle, you would never prosecute any crime, because by definition, all crimes happen in the past. What a preposterous excuse. The reality is, this intelligence community that is jerry-rigged for wars and more conflicts, more weapons contracts, always sides with the people who do the torture. They let them get away with it. And even if they do brazen destruction of evidence, they don't care. The Bush administration didn't care, the Obama administration didn't care, now the Trump administration cares, but in the reverse direction, saying, man, that is awesome. Not only will I tolerate her, I'll promote her. So the next time the CIA comes up with nonsense intelligence, understand that it wasn't a mistake. That was the purpose. All right, I gotta take another quick break here, guys. Afterwards, I'll get to the, speaking of nonsense conclusions about collusion from the so-called Intelligence Committee in the House. All right, back on the Young Turks, 2 tweets for you. Super last thing says, Trump just wants the information that validates his perception of reality. Unfortunately, that's true, and he's picked just the right CIA director. By the way, the Democrats should all vote no on that torturing, illegal actions that Haspel's taken, and they should absolutely not confirm her. Adam writes in, what is it with this administration and people who planned or did kidnap people? First Flynn with the guy from Turkey, and now the possible CIA director who actually did kidnap people. And he's right about that. If you don't remember, one of the insane things that Mike Flynn was planning on doing was he met with the Turkish government and planned to kidnap someone that they wanted from the United States, which would be, by the way, an extraordinary rendition, just like we do across the world. I guess fair is fair, but not if you're coming at it from our perspective. We don't want people getting kidnapped in our country, so part of the reason why Mike Flynn is rightfully arrested. All right, let's go here now. So yesterday we had what was billed as big news. The House Intelligence Committee that was investigating whether Donald Trump was connected to the Russians and whether the Russians interfered in our elections came in with their findings. Actually, it wasn't the whole Intelligence Committee. Even one of the Republicans on the committee didn't agree. It was just the rest of the Republicans. The Democrats didn't agree. It wasn't bipartisan. And the effort was engineered in a lot of ways by Devin Nunes, who was not only part of the Trump transition, but earlier was shown to have colluded with Trump in getting the information from that committee and giving it to the White House. Oh, they came in with a conclusion, did they? Wow, how interesting. So let me read to you what it is from the New York Times, and then I'll break it down. Even as the special counsel expands his inquiry and pursues criminal charges against at least 4 Trump associates, House Intelligence Committee Republicans said on Monday that their investigation had found no evidence of collusion between Donald J. Trump's presidential campaign and Russia to sway the 2016 election. Now, the guy ostensibly at the head of the investigation was Representative K. Michael Conaway, and he said this: the bottom line, the Russians did commit active measures against our election in 2016, and we think they will do that in the future. We disagree with the narrative that they were trying to help Trump. Why is this even news? I mean, I get it, it's a portion of the House Intelligence Committee, and I guess people have a duty to report what they said, and it's interesting in the case of politics. But anyone still pretending that this investigation is real is preposterous. How could anyone in their right mind think that? Can we just stop with the kabuki theater? And people keep saying things from yesteryear that don't apply to today at all. So a lot of pundits in Washington will say things like, as Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local. Yeah, all politics was local back when there was no internet. And most people got their news from the local paper in Rochester. All politics is not local now. So, they're having a bipartisan committee to investigate this. Yes, after Watergate, they did wonderful bipartisan committees and they were actually bipartisan. At that point, we didn't have the divisiveness that we have now. We didn't have the politics awash in money. We didn't have congressmen and senators who basically work for their donors. They're like the race car drivers with all the logos on their suits. So back then, they actually had opinions and ideology and sometimes worked across the aisle. Now they only do what they're paid to do. So the idea that we're having this kabuki theater where reporters in Washington pretend that they could get to a bipartisan conclusion. Did anyone think that Devin Nunes and the Republicans were going to go out there and go, oh wow, look at this, it turns out the intelligence officials were right. It turns out that Trump got helped by the Russians in the 2016 election. Yeah, our party was the guilty ones. Of course they weren't gonna say that. Of course they weren't. This is absolute garbage, useless garbage. Why is anyone taking it seriously? And by the way, one more thing on it in terms of the timing. Why stop the investigation today? The Democrats are saying, we were gonna call so many more witnesses, whatever. And by the way, don't get me wrong, I'm not partisan. I don't care what the Democrats on that committee conclude either. They have deeply political motives too. Now they might happen to be correct, but you think Adam Schiff doesn't care about politics? He's like, oh golly gee, I'm just doing this for the country. No, they both care about politics, they're politicians. Snap out of it, stop treating them like they're honest actors. They don't give a damn. Every one of these committees is partisan and is supposed to prove a partisan point. Like when the reporters pretend anything otherwise, it drives me nuts. Now, finally, in the Trump administration, the veil is being lifted a little bit, but they got a long way to go. So the timing, they did it this way because Mueller has not yet talked to Donald Trump, and he's asking to talk to Donald Trump and other key witnesses. This way, Trump can go, what do you mean? It's already been concluded that there was no collusion. The House Intelligence Committee said so. And all last night on Fox News, Sean Hannity going, we win, we win. It's you guys saying you win. It's like saying, we had a secret basketball game, and I can't tell you what the score. I won't let the other side tell you what the score is. In fact, the referees have already reported the score. The intelligence committee, the intelligence agencies already said yes, they were trying to help Trump. Don't listen to what the refs say. I won't let the Democrats talk, but trust me, I won the game because I'm kind of awesome. Yeah, you'll excuse me if I don't trust you. So this is so that Trump can turn around and say, no, this matter is concluded. So of course I'm not going to testify. I'm not going to talk to Mueller, and I'm going to try to block all the witnesses from doing that. And of course, right after this report comes in, Trump, now he loves to do big caps, but this was a tweet where everything was all caps. So basically screaming into the internet this message. The House Intelligence Committee has, after a 14-month-long in-depth investigation, found no evidence of collusion or coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia to influence the 2016 presidential election. Yeah, that's like your opinion, man. There's a guy named Robert Mueller who's called a special counsel. I think that the evidence he collects is far more interesting than the Republican opinion about whether a Republican president colluded with the Russians or not. And by the way, they couldn't even get all the Republicans on the same message. Representative Tom Rooney from Florida went on CNN and basically said, oh, come on, who are we kidding? Watch.
If you're saying, yes, you have seen evidence of this, but it sounds like there's disagreement, frankly, between Republicans on your committee.
Well, two
exactly
things,
where it is. If the Senate, again, emphasizing, the Senate hasn't ended theirs, Bob Mueller hasn't ended theirs. Why are you all ending it?
Well, two things. For what I said last week, that we've gone completely off the rails and now we're just basically a political forum for people to leak information to drive the day's news. So we've as you alluded to, we've lost all credibility, and we're going to issue probably 2 different reports, unfortunately.
Look, they never had credibility in the first place for people that live on planet Earth. But fine, for the reporters who were pretending that they had credibility, there is a Republican congressman telling you on national television, we've lost all credibility. Ignore these reports, the Republican one and the Democratic one. They're partisan hack jobs, they're totally useless. If you're wondering why Rooney's allowed to say the truth, he's retiring. He's not up for re-election, so he can say what he wants. Okay, now let's go to the next story. While all the chaos happens around the Trump administration, he is sneaking in some loathsome people into the government. And I want to tell you about one of them today. It's William Otis. So let me go to Kimberly Yam's report at HuffPost. She explains that William Otis, adjunct professor at Georgetown Law School and former member of the Bush administration, was announced as one of President Donald Trump's nominees. And this is important, for the US Sentencing Commission, a bipartisan agency that dictates federal sentencing guidelines earlier this month. So earlier this month, he tries to sneak this Otis guy in. So why sneak him in? Why? What's his positions? What does he think? He worked for a former administration. He's a Georgetown law professor. Must be a respectable guy, right? Wait till you get a load of Otis. In a 2013 post, he wrote for blog Crime and Consequences. Otis indicated he agreed with the judge's remarks that, quote, blacks and Hispanics are more violent than whites. We're still having a conversation. That guy's going to be in charge of federal sentencing guidelines. And later they'll tell us there's no systemic racism. The guy literally said blacks and Hispanics are more violent than whites. Now, that's preposterous, it's counterfactual, it's not remotely scientific, and yes, it's racist. But what I care deeply about both of these things, but if you don't care about the racism for some reason, okay, you're a weird person, but you should also care that the person is not very bright. So I'm going to show you that in a couple of different ways. But look, since they keep doing this, the right wing keeps saying blacks and Latinos are more violent. Let me explain the counterpoint. Now, I want to be very clear about this. I don't believe in genetic differences between the races like they do, because I'm not racist. They are racist. They believe in judging people based on their race, which is the definition of racism. Now, I don't have a problem with white people, of course, because they're human beings, okay? But if you were to look at the history of planet Earth and say which race has been more violent, is that close? Are you having confusion over which one that would be? That would overwhelmingly be the white race. So, I mean, how many things do I have to go through? First of all, in this country, was it blacks who violently enslaved whites? No, it was whites who violently enslaved blacks. And then they had the temerity to look at their slaves, which they violently captured and whipped and beat and raped and murdered and lynched, and say they're the violent ones. Have you ever seen the record of what happened to the Americas when the conquistadors came here? So, and what they did to the indigenous population? And that indigenous population was the violent ones? Are you out of your mind? And then we got every other crime you could list. World War I, Europe, World War II, Europe. Gee, I wonder who's starting all the world wars. The 100-Year War, the Crusades, the Holocaust, you could go on and on and on. Now, does that mean whites are actually more violent genetically than blacks or Hispanics? No! A person who has even a tiny bit of intellect understands that there are historical, societal, even geographic influences, political influences, economic influences, and the list goes on and on. And that is why you get the wars that you have and the actions that happen in history. But this guy who apparently is so stupid that he goes, oh, duh, I got it, man. It's the blacks and the Latinos who are violent against those poor white people. Oh, Jesus. And he hasn't even gotten to the Asians yet. He's in trouble for what he said about Asians. We'll get to that in 1 second. In a follow-up comment, he maintained that racial disparity in the prison system was not due to systemic racism, but making choices. So his thesis is, oh, blacks and Latinos choose to be violent and whites don't choose to be violent. Okay, could economics, for example, play a role? No, it's just a race, man. I figured it out, man. This guy's in charge of sentencing if he gets confirmed. Okay, so let me show you just one. I can show you a billion of these facts, but let me show you one fact about so-called choices. A median two-parent black family in America has a net wealth of $16,000. So that's what they're born into. Median two-parent white family in America has a net wealth of $161,300. That is, I can do the math for you, 10x, okay? So one side gets to make easy economic choices. By the way, guys, this is on average. If you're a poor guy in the middle of West Virginia, you don't have $160,000, I know that. But we're talking about averages here. And so you might have it hard. You don't realize how hard the other side has it. So one side gets to make choices on average. Maybe get to go to a private school, get to go to a college of your choice, get to have health care, get to have jobs in your neighborhood that are available, get to have jobs passed on by your dad. The other side doesn't have as many choices because they got almost no money. And then you don't take that into account. You just go, oh, I got it, man, it's race, it's definitely race. This is what stupid people do. But he's not done yet. Here's what William Otis said about Asians. Buckle up. The reason Orientals stay out of jail more than either whites or blacks is that family life, work, education, and tradition are honored more in Oriental culture than in others. This guy's an adjunct law professor at Georgetown. Anybody want to pull him aside and say, first of all, idiot, we don't say Orientals anymore. That's what people said decades ago. People are now offended by that. Whether you agree or disagree, you've got Asian students that go to Georgetown. For example, you've got Asian people in the country. Can you please stop calling them that? It's not too much to ask for. Okay, to me that's the smaller part of the problem, although a real issue, okay? The larger part of the problem is this genius has got it all figured out. Oh man, I got it. Blacks, Latinos bad, Orientals good. If you were to make an argument for the second most violent race in human history, would it include the Mongols, who I think are Asian? Would it include the Japanese, who were also part of World War II and invaded China and the Koreas over and over again? I mean, really, God, you got to teach them all of history. Like, you think that the Chinese didn't have wars over and over again? And does that mean that Asians are actually more violent than blacks or Latinos? Of course not. We're all Homo sapiens. We're all human beings. But some of the geography, history, economics, politics, etc. of that era caused a lot of violence in Asia. For example, the Mongols, they were nomadic people. So were, by the way, the Scottish and the Vikings. And what did they do? War after war after war because of the nature of being nomads and how it encouraged raids. That's why the Mongols wound up doing a lot of barbaric things. They also wound up having a giant empire that had a lot of upsides, but yes, there was terrible barbarism there. But this guy boils down to Orientals good, whites good, blacks and Latinos bad because they're violent. The painful idiocy of the right wing is unreal. These people are taken as like, oh, well, that is a scholar. And by the way, Georgetown, you ought to be embarrassed. How is this guy in any way part of your faculty? That is deeply embarrassing. Now, if you say, oh, no, you went back to the Crusades, you went back to the Mongols. No, but the Asians here are awesome. Last thing here. First of all, let's give you some facts about Asians in America. In the 1990s, the Asian American and Pacific Islander community saw its prisoner population balloon, increasing by 250%. Again, does that mean Asians are more violent? Of course not. Does it mean that Asian genes suddenly changed in the 1990s? Of course not. Or it could have to do with migration patterns. More Asians came from Asian countries like Vietnam and Laos who are more economically deprived and who were poorer. And the economy led to, their economic condition led to crime more than their genetic predisposition, as an example. And finally, I'll end on this example because I think it's an interesting and illustrative one. I happen to be Turkish American. In the conception of the right wing, well, then my genetics predispose me to certain things, and I am either violent or not violent, either rich or poor, I make the right choices or I make the wrong choices, right? Well, in reality, Turks in America are actually really well off. They're among the wealthiest minorities in the country. Turks in Germany, same Turks, genetically the same, are the poorest people in Germany. Now, why? Because most of the Turks in America have a profession. It was really hard to immigrate to the United States unless you had a profession, at least from Turkey. So a lot of them are engineers, businessmen, doctors, lawyers. So because of those socioeconomic conditions, they happen to be wealthy in America. In Germany, it was easy to immigrate from Turkey to Germany, and the people who already had no jobs and really desperately needed the jobs so bad they'd move their whole family across the continent would drive from Turkey to Germany and get jobs there. So that was a socioeconomic condition that created a poorer class in Germany and a wealthy class in America, even though it's the same Turks. It just might have to do with socioeconomic conditions and not race. But you keep having to explain this to people. And what's hilarious is that some of the right-wing people will look at these people and call them scholars and think that they're intellectuals. They're nothing of the sort. They're throwbacks who are embarrassingly unintelligent. And I guess it's appropriate soon going to the Trump White House. Young Turks.